Just when you think you know a thing or two about this conference, it just continues to remind you that you have no idea. What's up, guys? My name is Jake, and welcome into another episode of Somewhere in the Middle, the Big 12 show here at Play the Fight Song. Excited to dive into it again tonight. Week 8 is behind us, and we know little about this conference than we did probably 3 weeks ago. But as always, we have a big week 9 ahead. We will cover that as well. Before we get into all of it, we're, as always, brought to you by our partners over at No Rivals. Shop NoRivals.com. Use the code PTFS as Play the Fight Song, PTFS at checkout, and get yourselves free shipping on any hat of your choosing over at No Rivals. If you're a Big 12 fan, you got to go check these guys out. I remind you each and every single week, West Virginia, Arizona State, TCU, Baylor, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Houston, and I think I'm even missing a few, even Utah. They have you guys covered, and if they don't, Iowa State fan like myself, go to the teams tab, go to request your team at the bottom. Guys, it's super simple. You request your team, you put your name, you put your email in, what team you want to see from No Rivals, and they will do their part. They are dropping new teams each and every single week. And just because I did it today, I requested Iowa State once again. They threw me a 20% off. So those guys are awesome. We love working with them. Go check them out and use the code PTFS at checkout for free shipping. As always, at the end of the show, our prediction segment is partnered by them. So what you guys do, if you guys give me a score of any of the Big 12 games this weekend, say Kansas pulls off the upset and beats Kansas State 21-17. If you guys get that right and you're subscribed to our channel, Play the Fight Song, we will hook you guys up with a hat over at No Rivals. Shop NoRivals.com. All right. We have to cover it. We're going to go through it a little bit tonight. There is a lot to unpack from week 8. Awesome games all across the slate in the conference. The favorites survive. Some quarterback issues. There's teams that are kind of quietly going under the radar that will put them in the mix. And once we get in November here in a week, I can't believe it already. And to be honest with you guys, November football is a week away, and there's still, I don't know, there's probably 5, 6, 7 teams that have a really good shot at getting that spot in Dallas. And hey, all you need to win is win one game in Dallas, and you are in the college football playoff. This is exactly why we started this show at Play the Fight Song, because this conference is just so deep. It's so entertaining each and every single week, and we've got to talk about it. And just like we predicted in August, there's probably 8 teams that will have a shot at this, and it really still stems true here. But if you guys tune in each and every single week, appreciate it. What we always do, you know the drill. We're going to go through our players of the week. We're going to recap week 8. I have some notes that I kind of want to unpack, and then we get to the fun stuff. We look on to week 9. Prediction-wise, was not my best week. Coming off the 5-0 week 2 weeks ago, and I think last week we went 3-4. 3-4, and just like the Big 12 always proves me wrong, we have some absolute big misses, but honestly, isn't that the fun part? That's why we cover this conference. All right, let's get into it. Offensive player of the week. It has to be this guy, Darius Lassiter, wide receiver at BYU. A couple of BYU players have found their way into our players of the week. It seems like every other couple of weeks, but their games are super entertaining. They have guys that seem to step up every single week. They still remain, I believe, they're 7-0 now, 4-0 in conference play. Lassiter makes, honestly, probably the best play of the weekend in all of college football. The game-winning catch to beat Oklahoma State on that final drive. Really, really impressive. 6 catches, 129 yards, along with that score, as you see on our YouTube here. This wide receiver core for BYU's it's under the radar. I think they're starting to figure some things out. You get a little gunslinger, maybe a little too exaggerated with the gunslinger mentality from Retzlaff, but I think he's starting to find some receivers, and I think Lassiter, he's playing like, I don't know, maybe a third team all Big 12, maybe an honorable mention all Big 12 receiver, which might be good enough because this defense continues to win games for BYU as well. So they just need a couple of playmakers. They also ran the ball really well, but Darius Lassiter is our offensive player of the week. Defensive player of the week, Marquise Siegel, the secondary, the cornerback, at Kansas State. Big pick six against West Virginia on Saturday. 9 tackles. I think he was second on the team in tackles. And the defense really shut out West Virginia in the second half. I think they forced Garrett Green to 2 picks on Saturday. And the pick six from Siegel was honestly, it was the one that put the nail in the coffin early in the second quarter. Now I think it was the one that took them up 17-3, and West Virginia actually had a chance they cut it to 17-10 and then had a chance on the goal line before half to make it 17-17. But to get that big of a lead, to make that big of a play on the road in a night environment in Morgantown, where we know it's tough to play in this conference, that was a big enough cushion to kind of give this team some confidence that really sparked them in the second half in just a dominating fashion. A lot of guys you could highlight on Kansas State would be players of the week, but got to give it to the fellow who had the pick six, Marquise Siegel. All right. We have a lot to get to for week 8. We're going to quickly highlight some of the big headlines that I think really stood out to me from week 8. Last week, we did our power rankings. If you want to go back and check that out and kind of see how wrong I am on some things, I think some things we kind of landed and we nailed, but we're going to get our power rankings back in a couple of weeks. I don't want to do them each and every single week because it's honestly just going to be going up and down like the stock market. We'll kind of see it again back in a couple of weeks when maybe we have just a sliver of an idea who's going to be playing in Dallas in maybe the second week of November. But if there's anything we know about the Big 12, that's probably not the case. All right, first thing that highlights week 8. BYU and Iowa State, your favorites, survive. Both go 7-0. Iowa State heads into the bye week. BYU, I believe, is on the road at UCF this weekend. Huge game for them. But ironically, your favorites both win in pretty similar fashion. They win 38-35 at home. They both have to have 1-minute game-winning drives to win the football game. Iowa State, their win obviously was definitely more fluky as they were down 28-14 in the second half. You can hear all of my thoughts on that Iowa State side of things on our channel as well as I do the Iowa State fan perspective. But, I think they posted the graphic yesterday that said ESPN, their prediction, graph that they always do. At the end of the game, Iowa State was like 0.01% chance or 0.1% chance of winning the football game with about 2 minutes to go. And they were a first down away from RJ Harvey from being 6-1 and moving back in the Big 12 rankings this week. But maybe sometimes this is what good teams do. This is what favorites do. They just keep surviving. BYU, on the other hand, I mean, they were in the fight the whole time, took the lead coming out of half. Ollie Gordon, have to highlight him a little bit. He, from the jump, was all over BYU. You thought it was going to be another all-time performance like he had I think he was 5 touchdowns last year against them. They kind of kept him under wraps in the second half. Ollie finished with 100, and I want to say 100 yards rushing, and I want to say he had at least 75, 80 yards in the first half. So BYU responded. Oklahoma State goes on an 8-minute drive to take the lead 35-31, and it takes no less than like a minute and 15 seconds for Jake Retzloff to lead them down the field with that Darius Lassiter touchdown that we just touched on. So dramatic fashion, it's going to be like this for pretty much your top 6 teams. If you want to win this league, you're going to get into these dog fights late in November, and whoever can stay with the fight the longest is going to give themselves the best shot, and both of your favorites continue to do so as we head into the last weekend of October. Speaking of favorites, you got to ask the question, is Kansas State still the top dog in this conference? Now, I know they have that loss to BYU, but they are now coming off 2 impressive road wins at Colorado on the last drive, that Jace Brown catch, and then last week just absolutely beating West Virginia into a pulp. in the second half, winning. I think it was 41 to 18. DJ Giddens, I highlighted Taj Brooks last week that he might play like the best running back in this conference. And I don't know if I've given Giddens enough of his flowers. And that's coming from an Iowa State fan. He continues to run the ball so well, and he makes guys miss better than anybody in this conference. There's some speed with some of the other backs, and RJ Harvey has like strength that kind of helps him. And Ollie Gordon has probably the most athleticism of any running backs in this league, but like in space, I don't think there's anybody that makes a man miss better than DJ Giddens, and he has been absolutely huge. And then how about the kid in the middle on YouTube that you're watching here? Avery Johnson throws for over 300 yards. West Virginia says, you're going to beat us with our arm. You haven't done it against anybody all year. I know you had that big play against Colorado, but consistently, you have not beaten anybody with your arm. And he accepts the challenge. Now, where would I put West Virginia's secondary in this conference? Probably bottom three. Their pass defense it's pretty atrocious at this point. And I think West Virginia fans can agree. And they didn't get enough pressure on Saturday from that D line, but that's also a credit to Kansas State. The offensive line, while had some new faces going into this season, I think that's one thing they just trust with Chris Kleiman is that he is just going to continue to develop offensive lines. They're finally gelling. And if you're going to get performances with his arm like he did from Avery Johnson on Saturday, Giddens continues to be what he is productively. Yeah, they look like the most impressive team in the league on Saturday, but I mean, we've probably changed our opinions on the most impressive team a couple of times. Iowa State's kind of looked that way sometimes. BYU did a few weeks ago when they smacked Kansas State at home. So we'll have to wait and see. I don't want to come to any conclusions, but for a team that was preseason favorites next to Utah in this league, we all know where Utah's at. Kansas State continues to stick around, and I think that is a credit to that coaching staff in Kansas State for being so consistent. Another leader, somebody who's been quietly sitting under the radar. Do we ask the question, is Colorado, are they a contender in this league? Now, I think that's an obvious yes, but how legitimate are they? They quietly keep hanging around. Their only losses right now are to Nebraska on the road, which means absolutely nothing, right? And K-State at home, in which they were, maybe a pass interference away from winning that football game. It wasn't a pass interference, by the way. Colorado, let's look at their wins, right? They go on the road. They handle Arizona. We were on that, by the way. Arizona's in shambles at this point. They beat on the road I'm drawing a blank on the top of my head. I know they beat Baylor at home, and then they went on the road and beat UCF. So they haven't beaten a top 5 team in this league at this point, I think. But we're going to see. They get Cincy at home this week. Massive game. I think that feels like the best game in the Big 12 this weekend. Two teams who are pretty similar and in kind of the same spot. And I'm looking for one of those teams to emerge. You get at Texas Tech. That's going to be really interesting. That game could get into the 50s on both sides. Utah at home, at Kansas, Oklahoma State at home. Depending on how they play against Cincinnati this weekend, I think you're a favorite in every single one of those football games going forward. If you take care of Cincinnati as the favorite that you are this weekend, you're going to be favored at Texas Tech. Now, it might be just 2 or 3, but you're going to be favored. Utah, you'll be favored at home. You'll be favored on the road at Kansas. Oklahoma State at home, you will definitely be favored in. This feels like the best second tier team, right? So if I had the first tier at this point, Texas Tech moves out of the way because just what a horrendous loss that we really probably should cover more in this, but the defense is just bad. I mean, we said that last week. So if I had to go my first tier, Iowa State, BYU, Kansas State. If I had a second tier of like Cincinnati, Texas Tech, Colorado, I don't know who do you throw in there anymore? Arizona State when healthy. I think Colorado is the best of those second tier, quote unquote, second tier teams. And if you beat Cincinnati by double digits at home this Saturday, I think you definitely deserve to be in the first tier. I think then we can start talking about this team can definitely run the table and will be a one-loss team waiting for Iowa State, BYU, Kansas State to slip up, and they can be that second place team that gets into Dallas. And all of a sudden, where did this come from? I mean, I was one of them to write off this team after Nebraska. Thought the offensive line wasn't good enough. It's crazy because they're doing this with defensively, they've been consistent. Now, I don't think they're very good, and they can't run the football. And you get 2 picks out of Shador last weekend, and that game was never in question. So they're winning in kind of these interesting ways. But I've said it. This passing offense is as good as it gets. It will keep this team in every single football game in the Big 12. Let's see if they can. I don't think they can afford to lose another one, but they should be able to run the table. So we'll see if that happens. Last point from week 8. There are a lot of teams right now in the Big 12 who are in quarterback hell. Let's start with the first one, as you see on your screen here, if you're watching us on YouTube. Also on Spotify now and Apple Podcasts. Super excited to do that. Appreciate you listening and tuning this in however you do. The first one in quarterback hell has got to be Garrett Green in West Virginia. You start off 2-0. You beat Kansas and Oklahoma State. And now you get absolutely slapped around at home against Kansas State and Iowa State. Granted, 2 of the top teams in this league. But I think the West Virginia fans, the new West Virginia fans that have tuned into our channel, I think the conversation was a couple of weeks ago, you were one of those contenders. And now you're more like maybe the bottom of the second tier that I just highlighted or top of the third tier. Maybe that's what I'll do in another episode is put these teams into tiers. West Virginia feels like the middle of the pack, maybe the bottom half. Garrett Green, the one thing I think you could always rely on with Garrett Green was he wasn't going to win you games with his arm, but he wasn't going to lose you games either. And on Saturday, he lost you the game with his arm. Bad interceptions, 1 pick 6 we highlighted. The Nico kid goes in late. His QBR wasn't great. I watched the highlights looking back on it. I don't think he reads the defenses very well, but granted, he was thrown in at the end. Maybe give him some practice time and some film. And I think he's athletic enough. He's bigger than Garrett. But right now, if you're Neil Brown, don't you give Nico a shot? Like, what at this point do you have to lose? I'm on West Virginia Twitter. It's a toxic cesspool. It's kind of gross. And with what you said on the tailgate comments a couple of weeks ago, hoping the fans just have fun, regardless of win or losing, I think you got to roll with Nico at this point and give him a shot. Now, is he better than Garrett Green? I don't know. I mean, you're going to trust your older guy, right? And I think Neil wants to do Garrett right just because of how much he's given back to the program. Sure, he's won you a lot of games. But at this point, you're just fighting for maybe another bowl game. And what do you got to lose? Go with a guy who might be around next year if you are able to keep your job, Neil. So that would be my advice. But this is a fan's perspective here. We're not coaches by any means. Second team, Oklahoma State. Garrett Rangel looked like the guy that Mike Gundy needed to run this offense. And then he goes down. It was just announced today on Tuesday that he is out for the year. I believe it was a shoulder injury. Huge blow for Oklahoma State that can't seem to catch any breaks at this point. And now you're back to Alan Bowman. He was 11 of, I believe, 18 on Friday night. 1 pick, of course. He's always got 1 in him. I just think you're very limited with Allen. They look to the Zane Flores kid, the young kid. Behind him, I think he's got an injury going on right now. So who knows if he gets in. At this point, I don't know what you do if you're an Oklahoma State fan. Just ride the 7th year guy out and and go from there. I'm sorry, it's grim, but I don't think there's much. The Rangel injury is huge. He looked like to be the guy. Hopefully he comes back better than ever next year. But now you're stuck with Alan Bowman once again. Houston, you have Zion Chris and Donovan Smith. I don't know. I tried to look up if we get a Houston fan in the comments. Let me know. I don't know if Chris got hurt or he threw a pick in the first quarter and then he didn't really see the field. I think a possession after that. Donovan Smith goes in and then he throws 3 interceptions against Kansas. I said Jalen Daniels was going to throw a few picks against Kansas because I thought Houston's defense was good enough. It was the exact opposite. Good win on Kansas, by the way. Donovan Smith and Chris combined for 4 total interceptions. And it is just like, it's just pitter patter back and forth with, is there somebody on this team that can play, reasonable quarterback play? It's just not, it's not good. And when you're turning the ball over, that Houston offense is one of the worst in college football. That's like the last thing you can do if you're a quarterback there. So they can't figure it out. I even think they might have went to a third kid. I don't really know. It's pretty grim. Isaac Wilson, Utah. This one's the best situation because he's just a young kid who I think will get better. I don't know how good he's going to be or if he actually makes this Utah offense legitimate in, I don't know, 2 years. He's a 4-star recruit. He's obviously got NFL talent in his blood with his brother, but TCU got to him 4 times, 4 sacks on Saturday, 8 tackles for loss. They tried to do some reverse plays, some misdirection reads, just to kind of get uncomfortable. And then off of that, they did a lot of play action, and he just seems to hold the ball too long. The last 4th down of the game, I think it was Money Parks on a slant, and he just doesn't look his way. Like, makes one good throw to Dorian. I think it was Dorian Singer. No. Money Parks was the long one, the 70-yard pass. And then Dorian Singer goes on his Instagram and says that they're wasting his talent. Not disagreeing, but I also don't think you should be posting that on your Instagram. I just think, keep riding Wilson, see where it goes. If you're Whittingham, recruit in the portal, or just try to maybe get a younger guy, but who knows how long Kyle's going to be around. I don't know. That offense it's up there with like the Iowas and the Michigans of college football as far as really bad, unproductive offenses. And Mekhi Bernard, you can't even get him going because they just load the box and they know to just pressure Wilson. TCU really got after Wilson just with different blitzes and things like that. And it just didn't look good. And that offense is not going to win 6 games this year. So I don't know if they go to somebody else or they just try to have the freshman take his lumps along the way. Lastly, I would say Arizona State. Not that Jeff Sims played bad on Saturday, but just a tough break. You hope Sam Levitt can come back sooner than later because he was really good early in the year. And Jeff Sims, while he took care of the football surprisingly on Saturday, how long can you ride that out? Do you just play conservative ball with him, known due to his history at Georgia Tech and Nebraska? I don't know. I think Arizona State they're a team that actually will take pride in a bowl game this year. But let's see if they can sneak one out with Sims or hopefully Levitt can come back sooner than later. UCF, Ja'Cory Brown looks like the guy going forward. I'm not really sure how you just decided that if you're Gus Malzahn because he was 8 of 20 with 60 yards on Saturday. And if your name wasn't Kobe Hudson, he probably wasn't throwing you the ball. I think he found Randy Pittman one other time, but yeah, I don't get it. I seriously don't get it. I don't know what KJ Jefferson couldn't have done throwing the ball that Ja'Cory did Saturday against Iowa State. But who knows? Well, they have a big opportunity on Saturday. That being said, speaking of Saturday, let's get into it. Week 9 previews and predictions. Again, we went 3-4 last week. What we always do here, We don't pick spreads. We just pick outright winners because normally the spreads are pretty much close enough anyways, and it's the Big 12. So if you get a team, if you predict a team to win, that's good enough in our book here. We don't look to look at point spreads too much. As always, our prediction segment is brought to you by our partners at No Rivals. Shop norivals.com. Again, use the code PTFS at checkout to get you free shipping. Let us know in the comments who you got in any of these Big 12 games. Say Oklahoma State goes on the road, beats Baylor. Little upset there, 24-21. You go 2 for 2. You're subscribed to our channel. We will get you guys a hat at shopnorivals.com. If you've been tuning in so far, appreciate it. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, comment down below where you represent your Big 12 team from. We got a lot of good things here. Play the fight song with all things college football, as well as fan perspectives from Iowa, Iowa State, and Nebraska. I know we got a lot of Midwest presence, but if you're here tuning in for Big 12 conversations as well, we appreciate you guys. Let's go through it. BYU goes on the road at 2:30 Central Time at Central Florida. This is in Orlando. BYU opens up as a 2-point favorite. Here's the deal. Is this a trap game for BYU? Absolutely. You're traveling across 2 time zones. Everybody already knows if you want to get into the betting side of things, covering the spread as a 2 time zone traveler has been under 500 this year. RJ Harvey looked like he was his old self last week. I thought he ran the ball extremely hard, had a ton of big runs against Iowa State's young linebackers. I don't think you get that this week against BYU because I think the linebackers of BYU, quite frankly, are healthier and they're better. They're more veteran. And I will say that's one thing they have over Iowa State right now is the linebackers. So I don't think RJ has as big of a day. And up until Iowa State last week, he was really struggling. I said Gus Malzahn is giving Ja'Cory Brown the starting quarterback keys to the vehicle. I was, again, not impressed with his throwing ability. I don't see it getting any better against BYU because BYU forces you to more turnovers than Iowa State did. And you threw 2 pretty bad picks in that football game. You tried to go up tempo in the middle of I think it was the first half, and you throw a pick to Bo Freiler. And then at the end, yeah, you threw a pick there, but it's just like they didn't have to throw the ball. BYU, if they get up a score, 10 points, and you force Brown to throw the ball, it could be a field day for him. The big question offensively for BYU is, can LJ Martin get going again? He's finally back and healthy, it seems. He had 120 yards, I think, against Oklahoma State. Now, every running back pretty much runs for 120 yards against Oklahoma State. But I think this is going to be a big test for the offensive line for BYU. I was really impressed with the size and the speed of the defensive line from UCF in person last week. I do think that group could give this BYU offensive line some fits. I get why it's only 2 points, but I don't know how the power ratings just favor UCF's offense like this. I'm taking BYU on the road. I think that they got through their slip-up game. Now, we watched an Oklahoma State team go on a hot streak and then travel to Orlando last year and get absolutely trounced at home. Could that happen? Sure. But I think that this UCF team, I don't know how they get off the mat after that Iowa State loss. I really don't. So I'm going to take BYU to win, cover, whatever you want to say. I got BYU. Oklahoma State at Baylor. Ollie Gordon had his best game last week of the year, but the limited touches in the second half really, quite frankly, just mind boggled me. I didn't get it. I didn't watch as much of the second half as I did the first. I don't know if he was out. Somebody has always let me know. I'll go back and watch it, but Baylor they play back-to-back the worst defenses in this conference. Baylor gets Texas Tech last week. They hang 59 on them. They get Oklahoma State this week. 2 teams who give up a ton of yards in Oklahoma State and Texas Tech. So could Baylor put up a ton of points again? Absolutely. That's why they're a 6.5-point favorite at home. Again, Garrett Rangel out for the year. There's just, if you're giving me Alan Bowman, I don't like it. I I thought the offense last week in the first quarter looked really good for Oklahoma State, and I think the running ability from Rangel was something different that other teams have a hard time preparing for, and now it's just back to square one. Alan Bowman's pretty limited. You know, impressive win by Baylor last week, by the way. Texas Tech was one of my favorite plays. Again, absolute whiff. We've had a couple of those this year. We admit it around here. We don't shy away from it. But yeah, I'm taking Oklahoma State at home. Bad defense. Colin Oliver, Trey Rucker, and Nick Martin all out for Oklahoma State last week. So they can't catch any breaks with the injury bug. You hope one of those three are at least back, but I like Baylor in that one. Texas Tech on the road to Fort Worth at TCU. TCU is a 7-point favorite. Texas Tech gave up 500 plus yards and 59 points last week to Baylor, like we mentioned. TCU comes off a win where, honestly, they should have scored more than they did. They won 13-7. They couldn't convert. They couldn't score off a block punt inside Utah's territory. TCU just didn't. I don't think they proved much to me last week. The offense still doesn't look good. They can't run the football. Again, they couldn't capitalize on more points, which Utah still had the ball with a chance to win with 3 or 4 minutes left. And that shouldn't have been the case. The one thing I liked was the amount of blitzes and pressure that they got, but I think Isaac Wilson holds on to the ball anyways, and you're going to go up against a much better quarterback with Baron Morton this week. Not to mention, Taj Brooks still ran for 125 yards last week. Baron Morton's just got to take care of the football, and I like Texas Tech in this one. This one could be old school Big 12, really up-tempo, fast pace, a lot of points. The total, I believe, is at 66.5. I mean, it is up there, man. I'm going to take Texas Tech to win. If you were betting it, just take Texas Tech to cover. I don't understand how they're so high in this. I don't understand how TCU is so highly favored. I feel like it's just an overreaction from one bad week in the Big 12, and you'd think the power ratings would adjust accordingly. Maybe it's just because Texas Tech's defense is that bad. Now, Josh Hoover could throw for 450 yards on Saturday. That could very well happen. I promise you. But I like what Morton and Taj Brooks and those receivers can do rather than just Josh Hoover alone and no running game from TCU. So I'm going to take Texas Tech. We have a couple of dumpster fire games of the week. We're running a little long. We'll try to wrap these up a little quicker. West Virginia at Arizona. This is surefire, number one, dumpster fire game of the week. A loss puts both fan bases in absolutely hell, whichever one is on the losing end. Both starting quarterbacks, Noah Fafita, Garrett Green, had high expectations going into this year after winning 9-10 games with their teams. And now they both came off, quite frankly, their worst games of the year. Kansas State for Garrett Green and Colorado put Noah Fafita in hell. T-Mac, though, on the other hand, take his over, whatever it is. I think that he's going to have a ton of success. They're going to try to get him the ball, I swear to God, probably like 12, 15 times. Look at his targets. It was announced Jacob Manu, the linebacker for Arizona. I think he's like a 5th or 6th year guy. He's out for the season. Tough blow for the Arizona. What's been quietly a disappointing season for them, as they were preseason top 7 or 5 in this league. I think Arizona opens up as a 3-point favorite. I'm just going to take the home team just based off of that. Neither of these teams have proved absolutely anything to me, but I will take Arizona just for the home field advantage. Utah at Houston, honorable mention for the dumpster fire game of the week. Both teams, again, probably coming off the lowest loss of their season. I thought Houston was going to compete, I guess, against Kansas, and Kansas absolutely dominated at home. Shout out to Kansas getting their first Big 12 win, by the way. Do either of these teams get to 20 points? I have a feeling they don't. They're both offenses in quarterback situations I've highlighted numerous times is, again, it's a dumpster fire. And it's going to come down to the team who can run the ball more effectively and just limit their turnovers will win this game. I'm going to take, I think this is a bounce back situation for Utah. This is a good game for Utah to win and look at their record and be like, all right, let's just keep kind of the bowl game streak alive. Let's just get back to Utah football. We still have a lot to play for next year. Let's move on from this Cam Rising, Ryan Ludwig firing situation, and let's just try to win 6 games. So I like Utah again, -3 at Houston. The Sunflower Showdown, Kansas at Kansas State. This one becomes a little more interesting after Kansas's good win last week. Kansas State has won 15 in a row in this rivalry. That's unprecedented. That was almost like Alabama and Tennessee a few years ago. But Jalen Daniels is coming off his best game of the year, folks. Looked good. Didn't turn the football over. Houston's defense is no slouch. That's one thing we've highlighted that this year. They put up 42 on them. I think that both teams are probably coming off their best games of the year. Not their best wins, but their best games of the year. This is an elite running back matchup with Devin Neal, DJ Giddens. Devin Neal continues to just quietly put up these 100-yard games. He's as a solid back as they come. I already talked about how good DJ has been all year. So I think the first 1 to 120 helps their team win on Saturday, maybe. We'll have to wait and see. I think Neal's going to have a huge test, though, against that Kansas State defensive line. In Kansas, stat of the day, has been perfect inside the red zone this year. I believe they're like 20 for 20 or something like that. So once they cross the red zone, they've been perfect all year and they've been able to capitalize. It's just a matter of can they get there? Because I gave you the stat last week about Jalen Daniels and his ability to turn the football over inside the 40s. It's just not been good. I will take Kansas State to win, just to win. Now, I might have a play for you guys. Go check out our live Wednesday episode on the Kansas side if you guys want to hear more about that. But I think Kansas State will get this win and make it 16 in a row. Lastly, Big 12 after dark. This is the best game of the weekend. Cincinnati on the road at Colorado. Colorado, as of Tuesday, is a 4.5-point favorite. This is the one where I just talked about. This is the one where Colorado separates itself from the pack of the second-tier teams, saying, hey, we're legitimate. We talked about it all offseason. We can win this conference. This is where we prove it. Go dominate Cincinnati on Saturday. Colorado's covered 5 straight games. Colorado has struggled against good running backs. Corey Kiner has been really good for Cincinnati all year. Big opportunity for them, just like he did it with DJ Giddens. I don't see Colorado having success running the ball on Cincinnati with Dante Corleone and that good defensive line for Cincinnati. I just think Cincinnati doesn't want to get into a shootout, though. I think that's the one thing you want to avoid here. I'm going to take Cincinnati on the road. I think they get it done. I think they can do numerous things. While Colorado's been under the radar all year, I think Cincinnati has been quietly a really good team as well. And I think they both run the football and throw the football pretty effectively. I want to see Colorado's defense be as legitimate as they have been this season. We'll have to wait and see. And I think Corey Kiner can run the football well. It's just Brendan Sorsby's got to limit his turnovers. That's basically what cost them in the shootout against Texas Tech, and they came up short in that one. But I like Cincinnati this week, and I think Cincinnati will be talked about as an underrated team next week on our show. So let's recap it. We have got BYU, Baylor, Texas Tech, Arizona, Utah, K-State, and Cincinnati. Those are our winners of the week. Let's see if we can get back on track above 500. Again, that was our prediction segment, as always, brought to you by our partners at No Rivals, shopnorivals.com, using the code PTFS. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Subscribe to our channel, like the video before you head out of here. We will be back again for week 10 next week. it keeps heating up in this conference, man, and it is setting up for being an absolutely memorable November in this Big 12 race to see who can get into the college football playoff and potentially how many teams can get into the football playoff. Not going to get ahead of myself. So we'll get to that. I appreciate you guys tuning in. My name is Jake. We will see you guys back here next week. As always, how I got to send it out. Let's play it.